Well, that's the last time I play my mixtape for someone. All our parents are dead. Welcome back to my series on the illustrious history of the Final Fantasy franchise. If you're just joining me, this is where I'll be taking a look at each major numbered installment of the Final Fantasy franchise in preparation for Final Fantasy 15 in November, we hope. I'll be trying to avoid an in-depth analysis of the game's stories in these videos, as for most of the games I won't actually be able to finish them. I'm trying to finish this series in time for the release of 15, and therefore will only be dedicating about 10 to 20 hours for each of the games as I go along, so consider these as more of a general look at the games rather than reviews. With that out of the way, let's jump right into our next game in the series. After the blockbuster that was the original Final Fantasy, work quickly began on a sequel, with Sakaguchi taking up the position as director for the title. The game was completed and released within a year of the original, but enough about all that. Let's boot it up and get started. This is Final Fantasy II for the NES. Well, that ain't right. This is the original version of the game, but it's all in Japanese. Oh wait, the game didn't actually release outside of Japan. But as it turns out, there was a prototype US release that was eventually scrapped. The common belief amongst fans is that it was scrapped because of the upcoming release of Final Fantasy IV in 1991, the same year shown on the title screen of the prototype. As you may have guessed, the prototype has since been discovered and released, so we're gonna go ahead and play that. Apparently the version of this game is still in relatively early stages of development, but how bad can it be? Okay, yep, I'm out. I'm done. I ain't sitting through God knows how many hours of this. Sure, the translations are bearable, but on top of these bad translations, the original NES versions of the game also had a fair few bugs that could be exploited the hell out of. I want to keep to the originals of the games where possible, but I'm going to have to give it a pass on this one. Hey, I paid my dues with the original Final Fantasy on the NES, okay? I've done my time. I ain't going back there. You can't make me. Ladies and gentlemen, I have searched far and wide for the version of Final Fantasy best suited for this project. And let me tell you, what I got is definitely a close second. It's Final Fantasy Origins. The collection of Final Fantasy 1 and 2, which were originally versions of the games made for the WonderSwan, now ported over to the PlayStation. With a few changes, updates, and shiny new FMV sequences, this version of the game still has some of the exploits that the original version had, which allowed you to level up character stats pretty quickly. These aren't super game-breaking, and this way I can pretty much stay true to the original game, but with better graphics and an actual script, which is more than I can say for this video. Heyo! Okay, I tricked you last time, but for real now, let's jump into it. So after the intro FMV sequence shows a group of 4 young rebels running from an army of demon-possessed suits of armor, we see them in-game being caught by Empire soldiers. Hey, come on dude, that's a little insensitive. I mean, if they're peasants, then of course they ain't gonna learn. They can't afford education, dude! Check your privilege! Now this is one of those fake battles where you're supposed to lose. I'm not sure how many games had actually done this idea at the time that this game released, but I'd like to imagine that most of the players were completely blindsided by it. Just picture little 8-year-old Timmy. Oh wait, this is a Japanese release. Timmy immigrated. His dad got offered a job in the Osaka branch of McDonald's flipping burgers, and it was just an offer that he couldn't refuse. Of course, his wife wasn't happy about moving away from their 5-bedroom house in Colorado, or moving so far away from all their family and friends. So she refused to move, which led to a bitter divorce and a lengthy fight over the custody of Timmy. But his father won custody after it was discovered that his wife had been committing adultery with the fridge sales rep that sold them their newest fridge, which had a built-in ice dispenser. Incidentally, Timmy's father also won the fridge in the divorce. So our father and son went to Osaka, where Timmy's dad bought him a Famicom to try and fill the void the whole divorce had made in poor little Timmy's soul. His dad also bought him the newest blockbuster, Final Fantasy II, which was all in Japanese, but Timmy didn't mind. He booted up the game, eager to get lost in the world of fantasy. And oh look, a fight with some sinister-looking knights right off the bat. Timmy's in command of some plucky young rebels though, and they ain't going down about "Fuck you, Timmy, life is pain. The rebels are destroyed, the Empire wins, and there is no God." So this fight probably surprised a few players, huh? After your inevitable defeat, you are found and revived by Hilda and a white mage, Mace Windu, in a town safe from the Empire's reach. One of the 4 young heroes has mysteriously gone missing. Hilda explains that the Empire is totally going to wreck everyone's shit with a huge airship called the Dreadnought. The party pledges themselves to Hilda and to the rebellion, offering to fight against the Empire. having lost their homes and families in the Empire's attack on Finn. But Hilda rejects the offer, most likely due to age restriction laws surrounding enrollment. The party then sets about proving their worth to the princess, and do so by stealing a ring from the clutches of a dying prince and returning it to Hilda. Apparently the rebellion needs all the help it can get, as Hilda accepts the 3 teenage orphan pickpockets and sends them on a quest way beyond their capabilities. Although, maybe Hilda just wanted to get rid of them. Ah, sure, you guys can help. Yeah, go and search for some mithril for us. Yeah, dude, it totally exists. It's just across the other side of the world, so good luck. Here, take Windu with you too. He hasn't stopped following me around since we got here. Dude's creepy as fuck. Here is where your adventure starts, as you get the canoe, which means you can pretty much explore wherever you want to. I mean, not wherever you want to, because there are areas between the starting town of Altair and Finn where you can run into powerful enemies that will one-shot you. And this happened to me multiple times during the first quest of the game, meaning that I would lose all my progress, which was usually quite a lot since I hadn't gone into the swing of saving every 5 minutes. Now, I never got set back terribly story-wise, but it would suck losing all the experience I'd gotten from grinding. Which brings me to the leveling system of this game. I touched briefly on the amount of grinding necessary in the original Final Fantasy in the last video, but if Final Fantasy II was a person, it'd be arrested for sexual assault charges with the amount of grinding it has. There is so much goddamn grinding. Okay. So, during the development of the game, Sakaguchi and his designers decided to forego the traditional leveling system, where you gain XP and hit a new level that raises all of your stats a little bit, and some of them even more depending on the character's job or role. You know the one. They instead opted for one that levels skills individually based on how much the character uses them. So if you keep attacking enemies with your standard attack, you'll level up strength. And depending on what weapon you use to attack, you can level up your skill with that weapon as well. Using spells will raise your magic level, and people and the individual spells, as well as intelligence or spirit, depending on whether it's black or white magic. You get the picture. This system gives you much more freedom in how your characters grow individually, but this is where the grind fest evolves into a grind bonanza. Having to level every character's individual weapon isn't so bad, nor is some of their practical magic, like offensive magic and cure, but leveling a character's buff and debuff magic can be a chore, but I'll get back to that later. To level up HP, characters need to get damaged, and this can take forever if you rely on the enemies to dish out the damage for you. Most of the early game monsters either miss their attacks or run away from the fight entirely. This leads you to dishing out the damage yourself and attacking your own party members. However, you hit a lot harder than the enemies, and when you start leveling, you really need to be careful not to kill your own party members, because then it's back to town to revive them and probably rest at the inn, which is going to cost a lot of gil if you're low on health and mana. This trick to increasing your party's max hit points is actually one of the exploits I mentioned earlier, but it's specific to the original versions of the game, so Famicom and Wonderswan pretty much, which means there could be even more grinding required in the remakes. Despite this, I do enjoy the new system overall. Maybe it's just because Final Fantasy II has a more streamlined and fast-paced battle system anyway, but I don't find the general grinding as infuriating, honestly. It's really commendable that the team designing this game didn't just change the original Final Fantasy a little bit, slap a 2 on it, and wait for the money to roll in. They spent time crafting a world in this game. The story has a lot more depth right out the gate. It's a brand new world with a buttload of different monsters and a completely new leveling system, not to mention they did this all in a year. I mean, sure, this resulted in some glitches and bugs. The game was released, I assume, without much QA testing, but it's an impressive feat nonetheless. And they still managed to pack all of this into an NES cartridge. I know that annual releases of franchise games is relatively commonplace in this era of gaming, and many of them don't release in a horribly broken mess, unless you're, an Assassin's Creed game. But a lot of those games are just cookie-cutter games to their previous installments, and this one actually went out of its way to be different. It's a bit overly grindy, and it's a little rough around the edges, but the remakes see some of these issues. The only ones that really carry over is the grinding, but as I've said, it's much less annoying than the original. The decision they made to make an entirely new story and a new world began the formula of every Final Fantasy sequel to come. At least for a while. Each new numbered installment of the Final Fantasy franchise is a self-contained story, and with the exception of direct sequels in Final Fantasy Type 0, each Final Fantasy game takes place in an entirely new world. Final Fantasy Universe. There are only a few constants. Chocobos and Moobles inhabit almost every world, as does an airship owner that goes by the name of Sid. Also, swords are inexplicably still used even when technology has far surpassed their destructive capabilities. Final Fantasy II was the first observable example of many of these constants, with Chocobos and Sid both making their debut appearance in this game. This game is also where the first rendition of the now legendary Chocobo theme appears, which, like the rest of the original NES soundtrack, was composed by Nobuo Uematsu. The music in this game is just as wonderful as its predecessor, even if it is for different reasons. You have the return of many classics as the prelude and the victory theme. there are so many new ones that are pretty incredible, and the arrangements made in the Origins version by Tsuyoshi Sekito are faithful and very enjoyable. I'm not much of a music theory kind of guy, but I can gush over the music in the Final Fantasy series for days. Many of the themes match the tone and message of the game perfectly. The game isn't about a happy grand adventure like the first title was. I mean, right off the bat, the main characters are orphaned and ran out of their home, then chased down, attacked, and left for dead. This is a story about the tragedies of war, and the music does very well in reflecting that. Just listen to the Rebel Army theme. It certainly has militaristic vibes to it, but for me it also brings to mind a desperate and sorrowful defiance. Or perhaps I'm just talking out of my ass, who knows. But again, compare the main themes of 1 and 2. 1 is bombastic and brings to mind high adventure. 2's main theme is vastly different. It's slower and somewhat ominous, almost mournful. If you ask me, the music is what makes a Final Fantasy game, because so many themes are just absolutely enchanting. The music is good, okay? That's just what I'm trying to say, it's good! Unlike its predecessor, Final Fantasy II was much more story-focused, and as such, mechanics were implemented to complement this. There are dialogue options for NPCs. I mean, heck, Firion ain't Commander Shepard, but it was something of a cool new idea at the time, at least as far as this series goes. The mechanic works by allowing the player to memorize certain key phrases that crop up during conversations of certain NPCs. You can then ask different characters about these phrases or words to get different dialogue than the one text box they usually spout. The same can also be done with key items, and most of this is usually done to advance the story. Everything feels a lot more fleshed out in this game compared to the original. It builds on what was great about Final Fantasy and mostly rectifies what wasn't. The exception to this is the way you level up magic in this game. The original system had mages only able to learn 3 spells per magic level, and once a new magic level was reached, the character was only able to use the spells on that level once. I don't mean use each spell once either. No. The spells shared the magic points of that level. Now you got more MP for each magic level as the characters themselves leveled up, so you learn to use magic very sparingly in the early game since Aethers cost an arm and a leg, and the only other way to replenish your magic was to hit up the inn at your nearest town. In 2, on the other hand, the developers no doubt knew this system would not work with their leveling system that required you to continually use your magic to make the character stronger with it. What they did was get rid of magic levels because that was the dumbest shit ever, and give you a much larger MP pool after a few level ups. This allows your party to let spells off like it's the 4th of July whilst grinding around the overworld, but dungeons still required you to be conservative with your magic, since the more you level up your spells, the more they cost to cast. It might not seem like a big deal, but this gives the game a much better flow, especially in the dungeons. More magic means more healing, and more healing means more adventuring, and more adventuring means more fun, right? Well, no. The magic in this game goes from level 1 to level 16, and the cost of the magic increases at the same rate as its level. The issue here is that, from what I can tell, you need to use a spell 100 times to level it up. This might be fine for magic that you'll be using every battle, such as Cure and the damaging black magic, but this is a steep price for basically all the other magic in the game. Alright, see, the buffing and debuffing magic at level 1 pretty much always misses the target, so leveling up these spells is a must if you actually plan on using them. Since they're pretty limited on time when it comes to playing these games, I don't want to waste hours just grinding out my magic that much. The tactic I resorted to is a little something that I like to call the Final Fantasy XIII method. To perform the Final Fantasy XIII method, all you need is the cursor option config set to memory, and a drinking bird, or something that will reliably hold down the action button for you. Then all you need to do is walk around the world until you encounter a battle, kill all but one enemy, and then start using the magic you wish to level. Apply the drinking bird or equivalent item to the action button on your respective controller. Then go and watch an episode of Stranger Things on Netflix, or jerk off or something, I don't know. As I speak, my game is running with the Final Fantasy XIII method in place. But let me be real with you when I say that this is one of the most asinine mechanics I've ever seen, and that's in Final Fantasy or anything else besides. It takes any joy there is to be had out of grinding, and reduces it to mindless repetition. This is the biggest downfall of the leveling system in this game, and it's easy to see why they reverted to the original character progression in subsequent titles. Which is a shame, because I happen to like the overall idea of the leveling in this game. It could have been awesome if it just had a little more work, maybe? I don't know, game design. If you've seen my previous video, you may remember I talked about the contrast in difficulty between walking around fighting monsters in the overworld and exploring dungeons. This contrast is still there because you still have to manage your party's resources and health, and the enemies within the dungeon are always tougher than the small fry on the surface. They also added a spell called Warp, which works just like Dig or Teleport from the Pokemon games. You get teleported to the entrance of the dungeon, but the spell hurts whichever character casts it. This is a great way to deal with the annoying walk back through the dungeon just to get out, but the game punishes you for using it, so it isn't wise to use it in every situation. Ultimately, I like the contrast the dungeons give, because you don't want to be slogging through tough enemies all the time whilst trying to simply navigate the world, but on the other hand, breezing through a dungeon would diminish the feeling of accomplishment when you beat the boss and claim whatever it is you needed from there. The game feels really balanced in this sense, so long as you aren't too under or over leveled. The game also throws another new mechanic into the mix of of different party members. Throughout the course of the game, you will encounter characters that will join your party and fight alongside you for a few quests or dungeons before returning to the Aether and once again leaving you with the core group. These temporary party members are fully customizable and in your complete control for the time that they're with you. They're usually pretty awesome, like Joseph, a poncho-wearing lovable bastard who joins you upon learning of your need for his snowmobile. He fights with his fists and doesn't know any magic, but you can equip him with whatever you'd like, though why you would give him any kind of weapon is beyond me since he is a one-man army with just his fists alone. But hey, it's your story.
Listen to my story.
Hey, we haven't gotten to you yet. Shut up and wait your turn. Joseph leaves your party when he sacrifices himself and holds off a goddamn boulder to save the Three Musketeers from certain doom. I'm sorry, it still hurts. But I won't rest until I find his killer. That boulder is still out there, soaked in the blood of a great man. Rest in peace, dear sweet Joseph. Upon returning to Joseph Village, you find everyone is mourning their loss, including his wife and young daughter. It's actually quite heart-wrenching. For God's sake, did you at least grab his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat? I really like the art style of this game, actually. It's colorful as fuck. All the environments are well done, and they've even got a few little cutscenes in this version. And they're nice. I like them. They're pretty cool. Character designs took a departure from the basic ones that we found in the original Final Fantasy to something more akin to what we're used to in the recent titles. The unique designs give the characters more personality and depth, which only adds to the more story-driven direction the creators wanted with this game. My only concern is that with this more involved story, there's a lot of points in this game where you have to speak to one character in a town, who then directs you to another character all the way across the goddamn map, then have to go back to the original character, and shit, man. There's a lot of fluff. It's obnoxious in the older game when you don't have the airship, and you gotta fucking walk everywhere. And I get that they gave you the quick travel options in the ship or airship renting, but you still have to travel to a specific area for these, and it makes more sense to just walk it since you can grind and gain money in the process instead of paying. I get that it's an open world RPG, and they pretty much all do this, but just take a look at some of the ones like Skyrim or Borderlands. Sure, you have to travel around everywhere in those too, but there's a few things that make the traveling in these games less of a pain in the ass. Firstly, you can pick and choose your fights since the enemies just exist in the world, so you can pretty much just walk to where you want to go without even fighting anything if that's what you want. Now, there's nothing wrong with having random encounters in your game, it just warrants a different playstyle. But they become an annoyance to the player when your primary objective is to get somewhere instead of leveling. It's like, imagine you're just walking to a shop and you see a person outside of it handing out leaflets for something that nobody is interested in. Now, you don't have to take a leaflet off this guy, but you really need to get into that shop. Maybe you're out of milk, but you've already poured your cereal into the bowl, and what, you're just gonna scoop all the cereal back into the box with your hands like an idiot? It might even make you resent the leaflet man outside the shop a little bit. Because who is he to impose a leaflet onto you about fucking Sky Broadband when all you wanted to do was eat some goddamn Cocoa Puffs? Well, that's how random encounters can feel. So the other thing about these newer open world RPGs is the addition of the fast travel mechanic. See, in these games, you have to initially discover a location by walking to it yourself, but then once it's on your map, you can just instantly travel back to it anytime you want without walking all the way there. Now, you can argue that these games have a much bigger world than Final Fantasy II does, and that the manual traveling is necessary to make sure that you're encountering enough enemies to keep you leveling at a pace that matches the difficulty of the story areas. I guess that's a fair point, but I think fast travel could have been a solid addition to these games. This game was created at the time of the RPG's early infancy, when fast traveling wasn't even like a thing, so whatever, man, it's fine. Whew, okay, I think I've pretty much said everything I have to say about this game. Oh, except I didn't mention monster designs. Specifically the boss designs. They felt pretty underwhelming if I'm honest, but I didn't finish the game. I got maybe like halfway through, so there could be like a bajillion cool bosses in the second half that I just didn't see. But the ones I did see were just sort of dudes, or like little fires, tortoise. Yeah. Okay, now I think I've covered everything I wanted to. The game builds on the success of its progenitor excellently and takes the game in a great direction by bringing so many new ideas to the table. Some of these new ideas do ultimately let the game down overall, but for the most part, everything the original Final Fantasy did right, Final Fantasy II does better, with the anomaly being the magic, which it simultaneously does better and worse than the original. Overall, I think this is how a sequel should be done. A great soundtrack, a bigger story with characters that feel like people and not just like the animatronics at Disneyland. You can bet your Sally sisters that I'm going to be returning to Firion and Palace to finish up after I'm through with this series. I mean, you know, if I can even stomach any more Final Fantasy after this series is done. I'm going to be seeing Joseph every time I close my eyes now, aren't I? Goddamn multicolored coat.
Jacob wanted to show the world he loved his son, to make it clear that Joseph was the special one. So Jacob